Hey folks, welcome back to our channel. So it's been a while since we've posted a new video, and honestly I'm still trying to break in this gun and use it to kind of see the ins and outs of it more before I make a video. But I figured since so many folks are staying at home and probably bored out of their mind, I think it'd probably be worth it to share what little information I have about this now, so that it helps ease some of this transitional period when everyone's stuck inside. As you can guess, this here is the Marui M4A1 gas blowback rifle. Now, you might be wondering, well, a couple things look a little bit different. As you can tell, this is running the well, before we get to that, I'll say that, again, I don't have the full, I've only had it for about 2-3 weeks so far, and I've really just been testing it out, just getting to know the function and seeing how it compares to the old WE. One thing, and so I don't really have all the, a lot of experience with it. I'm sure if you wanted more, you can get it from Bada Bing. He's had this gun, well, not this exact one, actually. He's at the earlier model, I think, for the last 4 years or something like that. And so he's got a lot more experience at it, and he's published videos on that. So you can definitely find a lot more. But we'll see what we can do from a different perspective, right? And plus, I'm not sure if Marui has actually made some adjustments or made some modifications since their earlier release back in, I believe it was 2015. Some of the things that I've noticed were present in that video may not be as true in this one, and so we'll go from there. So anyway, without further ado, let's just get into what we can so far, and we'll go from there. Right off the bat, again, like I was talking about earlier, this does not look entirely like the, what do you call it, the ones that you might see online or in the stores, and mainly is because, let's start with the stock, right? This is the traditional or the classic military M4 style stock. It's not your LE stock. It does come with one initially, and that's this one right here. But I was never a huge fan of the LE stock. I mean, it looks fine, and I'm okay with it. But if I had the choice, I would prefer the military old school style stock. Now, keep in mind this is a real steel stock that you can put on an AR-15, an actual AR-15 rifle, and it's actually compatible with this one. A lot of folks are saying, well, the buffer tube on the Marui here is not quite mil spec, and you can't use, it's going to be a tough fit. Well, I don't think so. It's actually pretty, there's some wobble to it inherently of all these collapsible stocks, but it's very marginal, and I think it's reasonable. The one thing you'll notice, though, is because the way the stock is designed, notice how this one right here, it's kind of a slant at the end right here, right? So it's also slanting right here. So because of that, this stock isn't fitting flushed when it's fully collapsed, right? So this kind of sticks out, juts out a little bit. You can see the stock tube right there. It's not a huge deal, I don't think, but it is something that, kind of bothers me a little bit. I wish it was flush. So I kind of just let it to ride in the second setting like that when I like to have it fully collapse. Otherwise, if it weren't for that, everything is still fine. It works out pretty nicely. I will say one thing, though. When we get into terminology, I just recently learned this not too long ago when I was at the gun store. The concept when you're saying something is mil spec, right? Mil spec, there's a variety of different options out there. There's what I was going to say, there's the quality guns that are a certain quality that are lower than mil spec, and then there are certain guns that are going to be built with a higher quality in mil spec, and then there's something like in the middle, which is mil spec. This doesn't, and when I talk about quality, I'm talking about in terms of durability of material and design. But what I didn't know, and I kind of thought this was a long time ago, is that all mil spec, all guns are built to the same specifications, which are dimension-wise and size-wise are going to be mil spec. That's actually not true. So this here is actually, I'm not sure this is actually a mil spec stock. This is just a stock that's ran on a real steel AR-15. So it could be called as a commercial stock because, or it could be a mil spec stock. I don't know. One thing I'll notice though, I know we're talking a lot about this stock right here, but one thing you'll notice is that this stock here is actually an M4 series style stock. It's a lot different than from the XM177 series stock right here. This is the WE one. You all have seen this one if you've kept up with my channel. One thing I've noticed, I'll say this, is that this series right here, it originally is supposed to be for the XM177 series. This is supposed to be an aluminum style stock. Of course, for cost control, they made it out of polymer. But what you'll notice, the biggest distinction is that it doesn't have those hash marks on the side like as you've seen before. And you'll notice that this thing is a solid. This partition right here is a solid piece right here. If you were to compare it with this one right here. This is a real steel. Remember, this is the real steel stuff here. There's those hash marks right there, and then this central partition here is much thinner, but there's also this little edge here. It's kind of like a tab right there. Minor differences, but they're slightly different. And the real steel version of this, when the M4 series came out, this actually became polymer, whereas the XM was always supposed to be aluminum. One quick thing to note, though, I will say, for all the things that people crap on WE for, it does seem like this, the polymer they use to imitate the aluminum stock is actually done of a much higher quality than the polymer used to make the real steel stock right here. This tends to kind of scratch up your face a little bit. This edge right here, it's not as thick. And when you put it in, it's not terrible, but it does get a little uncomfortable. Now, I don't know if it's because this is a commercial or possibly commercial stock that's not of the highest quality. It's only like 20 bucks. Brownells actually sell those CAR 15 stocks, and they run for 40 bucks. So, maybe it's different there. It's possible. But since, I can live with this, I'm not going to shell out another 40. Now let's go on to the trades real quick. This is something that's obviously super important in all of these M4 series, right? You got to have your Colt trademarks. That's just essential. I think this is the original, right? If you're going to replicate it, you want to get this original marking by Colt. Of course, nowadays I don't think Colt has the contract for M4A1s anymore. I think it's now FN. That now makes it, but still, people associate M4A1s with Colt, and that's kind of why it's important that we want this trademarks here. Now, I'm not gonna lie though, right? When you're firing a gun, especially as a lefty, you're never gonna look at the trademarks right there. That's just something that you're not really thinking. It doesn't help out in any way. There's no way it affects performance, but really for the purposes of reviews, pictures, and just when you're looking at it, right? As a collector item, it's super important to have. Same thing with the Hartford, Colt Defense, Hartford, Connecticut, USA, very important to have. So that's cool there. I want to mention one more thing since we're on kind of the subject of real steel parts. This right here is the much slimmer profile handguards right here. As you can tell, it's a slimmer profile. It's more of the XM177 series or CAR 15 series, and because it's slimmer, it only has a single heat shield in there, like this. The original one, that's not what comes with the gun, by the way. What comes with the gun is actually the true steel M4 style, where it's like a double heat shield. So as you can see here, there are 2 layers of heat shields in there, and therefore the handguards are much thicker. The idea behind it being that, the original XM177 series were, much lighter, and when you fire them, the heat generated from the barrel makes the handguards a lot more unbearable. So as the upgrades happened, they made the barrel, the M4, a much heavier profile barrel, and then they doubled the heat shields inside. And so that's what it comes with. But the problem with that is that these handguards are a lot thicker, and they're I think they're a little bit more difficult to handle. I've been used to, because of the XM177, I've been really used to these slimmer profile handguards, and so to me, I just didn't like this as much. I thought it was a little too bulky. But they are very nicely designed, I think. High quality plastic, I think. I'm not sure if it's really polymer, but kind of light actually compared to the real steel. So one thing to note though is some people again mention that you can't use real steel parts on it, and that's not the case. In fact, if anything, these were actually the handguards from Brownells that I've installed on this right here. And in fact, these actually fit better or more easily fit onto this gun than they were to be able to fit onto my XM177. So I've kind of just went back and put in the old handguards of this one. But again, they were much harder to put, the real steel handguards were much harder to put on this one than they were onto this one. Okay, so enough of the real steel parts for now. We'll go back to those later on down the road. But let's see where I was going to go with this. Oh, let's talk real quick about the cost of this. These guns are really, really expensive. I'm not going to lie. To get the scale of how much these are, if you were to go into a store today and buy an AR-15 of any platform, there's a variety of qualities out there, some ranging from around $600 all the way, that's the entry-level model, all the way to something that's $2, $3 grand, $4 grand even for an AR-15. And so, for about $700, you can get an entry-level AR-15, maybe an MMP-15, and which some regard as one of the best, entry-level platform guns out there. So for $600, $700, you can get an AR-15 for that much. Now, granted, you might not have all the features at the higher end ones, such as double aluminum heat shields or like the heavier barrel. You might get like the pencil thin barrel. I'm not sure if those would be chrome lined or not, but it will be adequate, right? It will be adequate for the weekend shooter. So now, obviously, I'm not comparing the function of an AR-15 to something like this because they're totally different. You would not compare. But in terms of build quality, the materials used, you can compare the two. So for $600, right, you get something that costs as much as this thing right here. And so I think for the same quality, you would get the same benefits from what I can tell. Receiver, full metal, of course, Cerakoted. Not a lot of AR-15s that are in the entry-level market actually are Cerakoted, so they made the time to Cerakote this. And so in terms of function, very well. So that's just for now. That's just really just an external. We're just talking externals right now. Because again, I can't go outside and scrimmage with this gun and put this into different shooting tests or anything like that for now. It's a little bit harder to do so. So I'm really only talking about the superficial stuff, the exterior, externals, looks, comparison. I will say one thing I'm not as impressed with because I've been used to the running a real steel spring and buffer in this platform, right? And so when you pull the charging handle back on this one, you have actual real steel resistance, right? So that's a lot harder to pull back because you're pushing back on a real steel spring and buffer tube back there. Whereas with this model, right, it's kind of a little bit comical. It's almost like toyish to pull back like that. So, and it uses a completely different spring system. Oops, there goes around out of it. Uses a completely different spring system, so it's much lighter. I will show you one thing though. I hope it's going to be obvious in the camera. I'm not sure if it will be completely obvious, but notice how the comparison of the two sounds when you are collapsing the bolts, or you're letting the bolts go full home. So I'm going to push this to battery now by pushing down the bolt stop right here. Listen to this sound. This is a real steel spring and buffer, so it's going to be a lot louder than what it would be stock, but either way, it'd still be a lot louder though. So listen to this. Okay, that's the first one. Now listen to the bolt going back into battery in this one. So if it wasn't apparently obvious in the recording, this one was a lot lighter, and because the spring's a lot weaker, and there's a lot more systems built in this way. Because the Z system on the Marui, it's not about performance, or it's not about the sound of the realism. It's not, those things kind of take a back seat with this Marui gun, for good reasons though. Because where with something like what I've noticed so far is something like the WE right here, where you're getting realism in certain areas. If you were to tear this down, it looks internally looks just like it's a duplicate of the real steel counterpart, the original model. Bolt stop sounds a lot more, very loud, very, close to the real steel. But it's just not quite as, performance-wise, it's not as good as this gun. This gun was built more so to perform. Now, don't get me wrong, a lot of the stuff here is right on, but certain things I think that W does do a little bit better. One thing I will say this though, that I was super pleased with this, that I can talk about today, is the bolt stop. The bolt stop on the WE series is terrible. A lot of folks have problems with them. I'm not sure if they've recently fixed it or not, but that is something that it's a huge problem on the WE series. I've tried numerous ways to fix it, and I've never been able to really resolve that issue. This gun, however, the Z system that Marui has built and installed in this series right here is incredible. I am not worried about like, oh, am I maxed out on gas or anything like that, because the bolt cycling is a lot lighter, because you're not again, it's not as dramatic, right? The bolt closing is a lot softer, but because of that, and with the new Z system they've installed, the bolt stop is almost it's super reliable. You're never really worried about having firing a last round without it locking back. I mean, unless you're out of gas or something like that. But that is something that's incredible, and we'll talk about that more in a more in-depth review. This is just something I'm just highlighting, the kind of things that I know about on top of my head right now. So that is a great thing, and to me, I think having a reliable bolt stop or a bolt locking function is probably more realistic to me than having a bolt stop that can slam forward really loudly, just like the real steel, and have the capacity to run a real mil spec buffer spring and tube, so that you can have that realistic resistance when you're cycling it. That doesn't really help that much in a function. It actually wears out the gun a lot more, as I'm sure you all have guessed already, right? This is, and to be honest, one of the reasons why I bought this gun was I wanted to I feel like all these businesses were closing at the time, and I really wanted to, support, the local economy. So I kind of purchased this from Evic or Evike, I'm not sure how you pronounce it, locally. It's going to be more expensive when you purchase it here in the States than if you were to ship it from overseas. But of course, the benefit though is you support the local economy, and you get it much faster. It would have been months if you were to ship it overseas. So that's a good thing right there. But what I was going to say though is, like, when you're running the real steel parts like the buffer spring right here, the reason why I was looking at getting this one is because this gun is starting to meet its days are numbered, basically. As you can see right here, it's starting to show cracks on the barrel. And that's not good, because you got this heavy steel part right here, but you also got this it's kind of a zinc alloy barrel right here. So you got this heavy thing putting a lot of stress on it. Plus you got this violent action from the bolt slamming forward here. So it's really, I'm really about to retire this gun for the most part. I maybe only use it once in a while, and I'm switching this out as no longer my primary AR rifle. It's more of can be a closet collection piece, because I do like the design of it. I like the looks of it, so it looks good, and it's one of my first AR or XM177 rifle / maybe my only one. So I'm gonna try to push this aside for now, and that was really the motivation, one of the motivations behind getting this one right here. I think that's one thing before we go. This is the front of the barrel right here. It will have this one thing where there's this little screw at the bottom right there, because originally it would come with this orange plastic ring just around the tip right here, and it's held on by that part right there. I wasn't able to screw it out, but I did use fire to melt off the plastic outer plastic ring right there. But I cannot get the screw out right there. But it's not a big deal. No one really notices it. One last thing with the trademarks in the front right there, you'll see it says like 5.56 NATO 1/7. That's the obviously the caliber designation, NATO being the NATO standard among all NATO countries and rounds. The 1 and 7 is just refers to the twist of the barrel. So um, for every inch or for every 7 inches that the round travels down the barrel, the bullet will make one complete revolution. So you might see some other guns that have a 1 in 12 twist, meaning for every 12 inches the bullet travels down the rifle or the barrel, it makes 12 or it makes one rotation. So the smaller the number, the faster the twist being. We don't need to get into that today. That's just more of a thing because that's just not really relevant for this series right here, right? We know that with these rounds that they're firing, the hop up is really what's adjusting the twist, right? So it's really going to be much different than the real steel counterpart here. But it's nice that they include those numbers there. So that's it for now. I think, I hope, again, I know this stuff wasn't really all that great right now. I'm just going over some very superficial, glossing over some stuff right now. I'm not really doing a whole lot, but I just want you folks to have something at least to enjoy and just kind of show something instead of waiting for months on end for me to break this gun in and review every single aspect of it. One thing, last thing before we go, let's talk about the magazine real quick. I don't know what it is with Marui. Every single Marui I buy, whether it's the G19 right here or the G26, all their magazines, for some reason, they don't come with the little rubber thing, the rubber O-ring that sits out there. And every time you put gas in there, it leaks out of there. I've always had to install my own in there, and it doesn't leak as much, and I think it works way better that way. I don't know why they don't do that. But anyway, I put my own plastic ring in there, or O-ring in there, and it fits really nicely. And this magazine, I predominantly run it on duster gas. With duster gas, you can get roughly, on average, about 250 FPS. If it's cold, you'll get maybe 230. Obviously, if room temperature cold, not way too cold, you'll get 230. If you kind of like hold it, before, and you feel like, you wake up or whatever, you pick up the gun and, it's been on the ground and it's really cold, you might have to hold this, and you get it warmed up. You can get about like 270 FPS with that, with just duster gas. I kind of have seen like Bader Bing, he uses green gas in his guns, right, or propane straight from the top right there. And so I tried at first with propane, a full fill of just propane, and it runs for about 370. It is a beast running on propane, but I think you are pushing it pretty hard outside the parameters of the gun when you're running with propane. So what I do is a compromise. I don't like having to pick up this gun and having to hold, especially it's kind of cold, it's cooler now, it's not in the summer, it might be different for this summer. But for now, in the fall, winter, whatever, right, I don't like having to pick up the gun and hold it by the magazine to let it warm up before I start shooting it in order to get the full experience of it. What I do is I fill up with 95% duster gas, right? And then what I do is I take a hint, and I mean like a hint of propane, and just like half a second. And that raises up the FPS average from about 260 or so to about 300 to 320, depending on how much propane you put in there. And I think that's a good middle ground, so I don't ever have to worry about holding it like this, to warm it up, and I can still get a reliable FPS. Now, during the summer when it's hotter and it's, I might, revisit that and just do only duster gas. But for that trick, it's really helpful. And for some of you folks, if you're bored, I've made a video a long time ago about comparing different types of gases using duster, propane, and how to mix them together. And we'll go more on that later on with this gun right here and see if that's still the same principles apply about, and so it's very fascinating when you see about propane versus duster versus a combination, how much you go through, how much FPS you get, how much capacity you get. I don't know if that's going to hold true for this gun just yet. We will find out later down the road. But for now, I kind of use a hybrid combination just to get running around 300, 320 FPS. But again, I don't have the nerves to run full propane and get that 370 unless you have that gas regulator to dial it down a little bit. That's it for now, folks. I think, I'll put some still photos in the back so y'all can see this gun. But I think we'll once I get more tests out for this gun, we'll release it. But I just really wanted to get you folks to enjoy a little bit more of the new Marui system out there, and just a little something to watch during this more or less incredibly boring time when we're sitting inside our homes trying to stop this the spread outside. All right, thanks folks for tuning in. Hope y'all enjoy this content. I know it's not the legit, but there will be better videos once I get more information on this. Thanks a lot, folks. Stay safe out there.